Thank you, Graham, and it's always hard to follow an introduction like that. I hope I don't let you down. Somebody said to me at lunchtime, after a big lunch like this, you're going to have to work really hard this afternoon to keep people awake. And that reminded me of an inspector story where a head teacher fell asleep in the middle of inspector feedback on the school. And he was back in the office telling everybody about this, and everyone crowded round and said, "What did you do? What did you do?" And this, the falling asleep bit's true. His response, I don't think, probably is true. He said, "I just sat quietly until the head teacher wakened up, and then I said, 'I'm glad we agree on everything that I've just said. I'm away now.'" So, stay awake this afternoon. You don't know what'll happen to you. I'm going to start a bit with my story. And a couple of years ago, a bit longer than a couple of years ago, I retired. And the first thing that I started to do was enjoy life, which is good, and go and see a bit of the world. And a part of that was a lovely meeting I had, as close as I am to Graham here, with this beautiful tiger. And it was a really awe-inspiring experience as it looks into your eyes. And the people who are taking you around have said, "Don't worry, if you just keep still and keep quiet, it won't attack you." But tigers do kill people regularly still, so that was a wee chill. So I did some of that and did the Taj Mahal and Rio de Janeiro and Uluru in Australia and things like that. And then there was a bit of me still itching inside to go back to things that I felt I could still make a contribution. And over my career, I've had a very strong affinity with primary teachers in Glasgow. I worked with them for many, many years and great respect for them, some of them who do a terrific job under difficult conditions. And I wanted to go and do something in terms of professional learning for those class teachers in Glasgow. And I'd been a part of what you've heard a lot about this morning, developing the frameworks around policy and around support and around challenge for teachers. But in doing what I was going to do, I wanted also to think that it absolutely had to connect with reality. And it had to make an impact on the children's learning. And so the rhetoric, which generally in Scotland, and the philosophy behind it is very good and very supportive and very helpful, and I agree with it. I had to make sure that this translated into things that real teachers could do and understand. So, Ken talked about the class teacher as the central figure in change, and the person who's responsible for the biggest variation in quality. Remember, he was talking about that this morning, how the class, there's a greater variation in teachers in the same school than there is across schools. And some of the rhetoric in Scottish education has said that very strongly, but when I thought about it, I wasn't convinced that we always acknowledge that to the degree we should in what we do. I wanted to try and do that. And Graham's report was coming out at the time, an excellent report, a really inspirational report, and one which philosophically, again, is very strong. It was talking about, in terms of beyond the early phase, there's a big breadth of activities for professional learning. So there's not an issue about the breadth that's available. And people at these times were saying quite strongly, it's not about a course, as people have said this morning. It's about a much broader range of things than that. And that takes you on quite a bit, and we'd all agree with that. But it doesn't then tell you about some of the other issues that Graham's report mentioned, like sometimes the range that individual teachers and schools use for professional learning doesn't always provide progression or coherence. It doesn't always fit together in teachers' minds. So this was in my mind. And there was also the debates where some people were saying teachers can do an awful lot independently in terms of professional learning, and I completely agree with that. But I also think there's a place sometimes for people with particular expertise and experience in facilitating and helping that. And depth seemed to me to be a big issue. Just as depth of learning in curriculum for excellence is a big issue, depth of learning for teachers, if you're going to enhance quality, seemed to me to be pretty important. So I had a look at this table in chapter 5 of Graham's report. And when you look at it, the scale is 1, very ineffective, down to 5, which is very effective. And this was a survey of what teachers were saying were the activities that were effective in enhancing their professional practice. If you look at that, I notice a couple of things. One is we haven't got anything over 3.8. We've no 4s, 4.5s, 4.7s, 4.8s. Does that mean that from teachers' point of view, they're saying we don't have provision that gives us really very high quality? Now that can be the way people fill in a questionnaire, we all know that, but it did make me have that thought. And the second thing that I notice, and you can see it too, if you look at the bottom part of the graph where the higher scores are, the things like shadowing, school-based activity, peer observation, reading, good practice visits, group discussions and networking were coming out more highly. So this was milling about inside my head as I was thinking that what I wanted to do was put together a course for Glasgow primary teachers that would address some of the issues that I was thinking about. And before I tell you a bit more about that, I want you to put yourself into my shoes at that time, and just for 3 or 4 minutes, look at this. With a partner, whoever's sitting next to you, what's some of the features you'd build in if you had the luxury that I had of thinking, how am I going to create a good course? Go. Okay, folks. We're having time to give you a long time on this, although it's interesting. Shout out some of the things that you thought should be built in. Sorry?
Oh, no, sorry, I was just...
Practitioner inquiry.
Action research, I said. But...
Action research and practitioner inquiry.
Time.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
How much time?
Might be different to different people.
Okay, let's leave that and move on. I'll come back to it, yeah?
I think what's your aim for this course? And I think meeting the individual needs of the huge variety of teachers that you'll have on there, even though they're beyond the early phase.
Yes. Broad terms, that's the aim from Graham's report, developing reflective and inquiring teachers who are actively engaged in continuous improvement. But yes, good. Can I have some...
Professional judgment's been valued and that you know the children you're working with.
Yes, okay, that's a really good point. Lots of really good points, yeah.
Balance between something you're doing in the classroom but coming to meet with other people to discuss professionally.
Excellent, you agree? Yeah, a lot of nodding heads here, yes?
Shadowing managers and also something in interdisciplinary learning if it's secondary teachers.
Okay. I'm talking primary, but yes, it's good to think what the equivalent is for secondary, yeah?
Teaching learning communities built into the school curriculum. We then have teaching learning communities where teachers are then part of these little communities and come together 2 times each semester.
Okay.
Connections with universities.
Connections with...
One there.
Yes, why would you want to do that? Tell me, come on.
Because it would be a way of bringing small bits of research together into a bigger piece.
Okay. Couple more and then we need to move on. These are lots of really good design features you could build in.
Acknowledging prior learning and taking it from there rather than always starting from the beginning again.
Okay, now how do you do that with a group of teachers?
You'd have it differentiated.
Differentiated, okay. Were you coming in?
Professional dialogue, whether face-to-face or through a networking facility.
Okay, lots of professional dialogue. Okay, here's what I came up with. And they've got a number of features of what you've been saying in. Somebody said time, and I wanted it to be extended so that I could get that depth. A focus on what was happening in the classroom, do you agree? Really important. A variety of ways of learning matched to different purposes. I was conscious, particularly that time, 2.5 years ago, of a lot of confusion in ideas about curriculum and assessment and pedagogy, and I wanted to pay attention to that. Research and good practice. A big emphasis on improving things for the learners in the classroom, so improvement projects. Presentations to colleagues to share the learning. Lots of dialogue, and teachers taking professional responsibility for their own learning, but in small teams, in trios we use, to visit each other, to support each other, and to talk and motivate each other. And so I went to Glasgow City, and I must thank Glasgow City, and I said, here's what I want. You to fund for your teachers to come out for about 5 or 6 days over a 12-week period, to attend twilights, to be able to visit each other, to be supported by their heads. And they said, go for it. So I must thank and commend Glasgow for that. That was a really, I think, positive and brave move that they made to put professional learning so high up. So what I want to do now is give you a bit of a flavour of some of these things. In terms of the structure, there's not a lot to be said about that. That's the structure of the course, a mixture of full days on curriculum, on pedagogy, on assessment, and how to use ideas from those areas to make things better for learners at the class level. The visits I've mentioned. The twilight sessions, we put in themes such as closing the gap, involving parents, interdisciplinary studies, and so on, often in response to what the teachers on a course, particular course, will say, we'd like something on that. And gaps over the 10, 12 weeks for the teachers to work on their folios and end up with presentations. Now, the first course, they were very resistant to presentations. You know, some of them didn't want to do it. That's gone. We make it low-key, ban PowerPoint, but have teachers just talking for 7 or 8 minutes about what they've done in their class to make things better. They wanted me to say no presentations. I said, no, it's a professional responsibility in the time we live in that you need to do that. The curriculum, the assessment, and the learning and teaching ideas, as I say, we use those as a focus for improvement. So you take an idea like challenge, and you think about what we mean by challenge in plain English and day-to-day language, and how challenge affects the different groups of learners in your class and so on. And how send people back to ask their kids about challenge. Is the work you've been having recently too easy, too hard, or about right for you? When do you learn best? And to the first question, they nearly always answer, too easy. And for the second one, they answer, when it's about right, or it's too hard, or it's hard, not too hard. And that makes people think about different areas of their work. But one of the things that teachers say is, don't just tell me, and we need to build in telling and sharing of research and good practice evidence, but also wanting to show me. and the classroom visits are the occasions where they see in real practice. But we also do feed in a number of video clips which are surprisingly hard to get in Scottish resources of actually good teaching in the classroom. I want to just show you one just now as an example. Here's an example around teacher questioning. And it's set in an international school. It's a teacher trying to get kids to talk at length and explain.
We play the explanation game in different contexts in the classroom. We play the explanation game with a box full of artifacts to do with the postal system as a way to introduce our unit on the postal system. And what I'm trying to do is play that game in different contexts so that the children start to see that the game helps develop our thinking and our sharing of different ideas. Today, we're going to be looking at a piece of artwork done by a grade 12 student. And I want them to really start to look at what's in a painting and to also think a little deeper, dig a little deeper about what they think a painting might be about or what it might be communicating to us. I'm curious to see what kinds of things the children will say. The piece of artwork is abstract, and it'll be curious to see what they come up with. This is the piece of artwork I told you I would bring to class that somebody in grade 12 painted. Yeah, a high school student painted this painting. But before I turn around the painting, before you start to look at the painting, I want you to remember what the explanation game is. So we're going to talk about the things that we see in the painting. I want you to look carefully at the painting. Tell me what you notice about the painting. And then you're going to guess and say why. Then you're going to try and tell me what you think the painting is about. And you tell me why you think that. All right, this is the painting that the high school student painted. Can you move your toes, Margaret? Ooh, it's so big. I'm going to get a pen so that I can write down things that you say. In case you say something that we might need to remember later, I'll put it down on the paper. Okay, so tell me, what do you notice about the painting? What do you think it is? What do you see when you look at it? Fahad.
I see the black dots.
Okay, so you see black dots.
They're not dots.
Sophia.
I see some gray and the painting looks like a Dalmatian skin.
What makes you say that?
Well, Dalmatians have dots, but these are a little bit lines. Well, my Dalmatian in China has some.
Mars?
It looks like they're animals going around.
What makes you say that?
I could see a lion running.
Can you show me where you're looking on the painting? Okay, oh, I see what you mean.
I see a crocodile.
When they hear ideas that are shared by students, it inspires their own ideas. And it's like little sparks that sort of catch and move through the class or move through the students as they think. Nina?
And it looks like a zebra.
What makes you say that?
Because there's black and white. They look like Japanese words.
What looks like Japanese words?
Some looks like Japanese words, like which one?
What is it you're looking at that looks like Japanese words?
Like that.
Mert, have you ever seen Japanese writing before?
Yeah.
Is that what it reminds you of? If I were to tell you that this had nothing to do with an animal, what else do you think it might be about? What other explanation could you come up with for this painting? Mert?
I'm going to do a funny thing. It's about running, I think.
It's about running. Can you tell me more?
It's like these things will have feet and it goes like this.
Sophia?
It reminds me of my mommy's hair because they're a bit gray and white and black.
Many different ideas. Some of you said animals. Now we have the idea that reminds Sophia of her mother's hair. Mert said it reminds him of people running. Mila?
It has a lot of movement.
How so? Can you explain to me? Tell me more.
Some are different with those and it looks like it's going like
Okay. Sophia?
It looks like skipping paint.
Why? What makes you say that?
Well, the lines remind me of skipping and happiness.
Why is that?
I don't know, but that just came to my mind.
Okay. I was really surprised by...
What did you think of that extract?
Well, the teacher was very good at challenging the children to, sort of, they were coming up with animal ideas, and she said, well, what if I tell you it's got nothing to do with animals? So she was pushing the children to delve deeply into their, obviously, huge imaginations.
Yep. And did you like the way she moved the conversation on there?
Yeah, it was very skilled, very calm.
I thought so too. I thought that was quite skilled. Sorry?
I was just going to agree with, he was speaking talking before about the teacher in the classroom, the kinds of questions she was asking the children. That's exactly what was moving that learning forward, was the questioning skills that she had. And that was very, it seemed to me that she was very highly skilled in asking children of that age questions.
Yeah. Do other people agree she was a highly skilled questioner? Yes. And what was it about the way she asked questions that made you say she was highly skilled?
It was just, what makes you say that? It was very conversational. It was, very, it was just the way in which she approached it. It was very calm.
And the situation itself was open-ended. There are no right answers as such in that. So, but what makes you say that? Getting them to explain, show, give reasons. I'm just using that as a small illustration of, I think, the potential for clips like that, for good dialogue, but dialogue that can make a difference. Because if we look at the research on dialogue, this is Robin Alexander's research, and it's covering not just this country, it's covering the England and Wales. It's replicated in the States, it's been replicated in Australia and in Canada. When he analyses the uses that teachers mostly use dialogue for, there are these three things at the top. Teach ideas and facts through repetition. Recall, remember what we were doing yesterday? Do you remember? Who can tell us that? So recalling previous learning through questioning, explaining, and instructing. But less frequently for those two things, discussion to share ideas, solve problems, and less frequently do you see dialogue that builds up in the way that example does, where one answer builds on the other. And his comment on that is the teaching which uses only the first three rarely challenges the kids to think. And we want the kids to think. Do you agree with his conclusion? And the blend here I'm trying to show you is that we're using real practice, examples, we're trying to build in up-to-date research, and we're trying to use that because then people go away and with that in mind, they look at their own practice. So it's trying to make the course a very grounded course. And of course, as well as seeing examples on video clips of practice, they're seeing the examples of teachers in similar contexts to their own and at the same stage. When they go on visits to each other, they're encouraged to focus on particular learners in a class and often think about where would you go next with that learner? What would be the next steps for that child to challenge them to make their progress better? And that's just a wee example there where a teacher brought up a couple of children. The first one is using reasons because. The second one where it's a very straightforward, simple sentence, and it's with an early P2 class where she's trying to think how the children can both extend their sentences in their writing, but also to move on to a second sentence. So the issues and the problems that they create are real and about real children. And this is our professional agenda. Here you've got some children trying to explore their thoughts, a P2 class about the solar system and the planets, and you can see shining lights and trying to position different planets and so on. And here, point collectively at what they think is true or false or don't know. One of the Harvard techniques where you get them together so that they're all committing at the same time to giving their thoughts. And there's some of the things that they say. And for example, in this class, because I happened to be eavesdropping, kids were saying things like, the sun's made of fire. Somebody else says, why doesn't it go out then like other fires? And the other child says, because it's so big. And then they move on, the moon looks smaller, but it's bigger than Scotland. And somebody else says, the moon follows you. And the other one says, can you always see it? And the things they get together that they think about the sun is, it might sleep in the clouds. It might play hide and seek. The sun moves across the sky. It's bright and it's light. The sun goes round the world. The sun stays still, but it goes behind the clouds. Now, I know that the clouds are moving and the sun is not. It's staying still. But the point about this is the kids are committing their ideas and their thinking, and there's confusion and there's misunderstanding. But that's the real raw material of learning that develops, that we all develop as young scientists, as young thinkers, where we use metaphors and we get confused, but move on. And then she uses books and she uses the computer and different things to move the kids on. Every teacher has to do an improvement project, and it's basically emphasizing what teachers can do in their own classrooms, looking at their own practice. Now, I'm not knocking for a minute leadership, teamwork, any of these things, but I think in Scotland we've neglected the power of class teachers, subject teachers, to make improvement at their own hand. Oh, you can come again. So, we talk a lot about these improvement projects, and they involve trios supporting each other, but each project is individual. And we're making the shift towards teachers getting confidence to use their own judgments about what is good and where their children need to go. And the model that we use is a very simple action research model, where the teachers have to think about what I'm going to improve, and they pick something in their class that they think would benefit the learners, and they have to justify why they picked that. They have to give a very clear picture of what things are like at the start. And that involves them sometimes in assessment tasks and sometimes in recording their observations very clearly about what happens at the start. And they have to focus on that then as the outcomes for learners change over time. And they have to think about doing something differently to make these changes happen. Because there's a lovely Einstein quote, which is, insanity consists of doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. They have to think about what they're going to do that's a wee bit different from that and reflect on that. And they have to show at the end and demonstrate to their colleagues they've made improvements. Simple, easy to understand, but something teachers can do and teachers can take pride in. Dialogue sessions, very much at the heart of the way we deliver the course and the way we split people constantly into small groups to talk about things and then share. I'm not going to show this video clip, I'm running out of time. Emphasizing the professionalism of the teachers. Few comments there on working in trios and what they think about that, but they're not just concentrating on their role within the class, they're thinking about moving outwards. End of course evaluations, just flick through. And I want you to leave you with these questions. First of all, though, just to say the course is recognized by GTCS and it's now accredited towards Masters Learning by Strathclyde. But this seems to me to raise the question, how in Scotland can we organise a deep refresh for teachers through professional learning? I think that's what this course does, but how can we do it much more commonly and across the country? And people, when asked them at the end of the course, what would you be prepared to give up for this? If, for example, we went from 5 in-service days to 4, but every 5 years you had an entitlement to an extended course, which would you prefer? And there all the hands up, I think you can guess. They're all saying when they think about the impact of each individual in-service day, they want something more professional, more in-depth, stronger. And I'll leave the second question just because of time. I want to finish up just with a 3-minute set of voices that the teachers, the kids, that others, head teachers have made on the course, and it'll just run through on a loop. before very long, I'll be off to the glue factory, and I want people in universities and authorities to look at this and think, is there something here for other authorities and providers of CPD? Thanks very much.